Good afternoon and welcome to Markets Today. You know, it's a wacky Wednesday when the NSC is very exciting with regards to turnover and a lot of activity going on there. We've seen 750 million with regards to turnover traded thus far. Safaricom is the top stock, 10.8 million shares traded at 27.40 for the day. Following closely is Equity Bank, which has traded at a price of 40, and KCB also joins the ranks with regards to price, trading at 40. We're seeing a bit of excitement on both counters ahead of the second half results, which are due anytime this week or next week. I am your host, Mbithe Mwema, giving you insights of what's happening on the NSC. Co-hosting the show with me is Mr. George Bodo. George, what's going on in the markets at this point in time?
Lots of things. You just said that it's a heavily traded market. Actually, since Monday, it's been a heavily trading market.
Wow. Which
is quite surprising. And of course, today, almost looking like we might hit a billion shillings. Imagine. 30 minutes to market close.
30 minutes, we could easily hit the 1 billion mark. We haven't done that in Yes, that's true. But then conversely, on the FX markets, the currency continues to weaken.
Yeah, it's a bit of a chaos over there. Now we're talking about 104.35. Like yesterday we were 104.35. It looks to be stable.
103.45 as well.
I'm just wondering whether we will go back to 100. Is it a new era?
A couple of things. So when you speak to people out there, there's suddenly been the issue regarding corruption and the changes at Treasury. But then today, what we're also looking out to see is what the U.S. Fed decides. It has been meeting yesterday and today. The expectation is they'll probably cut rates by about 25 bips over the day. So if that happens and the currency weakens there, it could have an impact on our currency. But it's really wait and see what happens.
Yeah, but I think the currency front is very important to mention that there's also an element of the US dollar has been strengthening globally.
Exactly.
I saw yesterday
the
US dollar against the British pound. I just a bit of strengthening there over the last 4 months.
So the converse, if it weakens, if they cut rates and it potentially weakens, and that can potentially add a little bit of strength on the
expectation.
Local.
The market expectation largely is that the US Federal Reserve could actually cut to the extent of about 25 basis points.
Let's see the impact of executive power on the technocrats. Interesting news coming out, George. Inflation numbers, 6.27% versus 5.7% last year, largely driven by food, transport costs, alcoholic beverages. We're beginning to see the impact of excise tax actually trickling down to the consumer.
Yeah, but I read more of fuel price adjustments that we've seen. There was an adjustment last month, and rather early this month, to factor in for that inflation adjustments. And even the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee, in the press communique they released, they actually cited those price adjustments as a threat to inflation going forward.
That's
something
very true.
They'll watch out for. So I see more fuel price adjustment in this. But the beauty is that it's still below the MPC's upper band. So it's nothing yet to worry about. But that month-on-month
7.25?
Yes. That month
7.5%.
7.5%, yeah. That month-on-month almost 100 basis jump.
That's a huge jump.
It's a huge jump, actually.
And there could be another jump because we've only seen part of the excise tax implemented with regards to pricing on alcoholic beverages, and there's still the ongoing debate on the finance bill of an added 15% tax on alcoholic drinks. That's touching on the wines and spirits mostly. So maybe something else that could come. And as well, we've also been following the finance bill. There's also the element of an added corporate tax of potentially getting to 35%. So a couple of tax initiatives that could have an impact on inflation.
Yeah, we talk about tax initiative. Very interesting. The Treasury has failed to meet its fiscal targets for 2018-2019. Collection just came at about 1.44 trillion.
Okay.
Targeted. There was a revised. The initial target was 1.6 trillion.
1.6, but
they revised it down to 1.5 trillion.
Okay.
Now they've only achieved 1.44 trillion, which is very, very...
And they're hoping to achieve 2.2 trillion in this
actually,
fiscal
they're
year.
targeting 2.2 trillion in the current fiscal year.
George, it's what we always say. So the fiscal deficit is really not 600 to 700 billion. It's actually potentially closer to a trillion.
It's actually very important because now when you talk about a 90, I don't know what, that's probably 90% performance rate. Well, it's still good, but it has, you remember, when it comes to fiscal deficit, even a 10% basis point difference has a big impact on fiscal deficit. It has a big impact.
Yes. So increasing primary deficit, yet on the other side, the MPC is not necessarily effective with regards to signaling on monetary policy.
Yes, and in fact, the most important, the most ideal thing that Treasury should do with those kind of tax figures coming in is to issue supplemented budget and advise down on its expenditure
so
plans.
So it's that watch and see. So politics, yes, and the impact on the economy. But that said, again, the NSC remains quite robust, ignoring anything that's happening with regards to corruption and the changes at the Treasury, which is quite surprising, I must say. But then of interest, in as much as the volumes are beginning to increase on a day-on-day basis, we're largely seeing foreigners being net sellers. So that's also something to look out for alongside inflation numbers and the currency.
And corporate actions.
And corporate actions.
So any corporate releasing, kicking off the Q2 earnings season next week, and we also seen some late releases of results. So today we saw East African Cables release results.
Okay, how about those? Have you had a review?
7. Well, they managed to narrow down the loss position from about 2.24 shillings a share to about 1.92 shillings a share, but they're still in the loss territory. But my question is, should a company be releasing results 7 months after the end of its fiscal calendar? Well,
if any changes happen at the Capital Markets Authority, we hope to see you there and you can answer that for us. But ladies and gentlemen, today we have a very interesting conversation. We want to take a look at the infrastructure set up in Kenya. Who's financing it? What are the opportunities? How should we structure this? And what can you as an investor do? To help us understand and unpack this conversation is Mr. Mwawasi Kilungi, who's the CEO. And he's also a practitioner in this industry. Join us shortly after the daily commodities as we take a short break and come back to discuss infrastructure spending and funding as well as investment opportunities.